Recent developments in Mozambique's elections have escalated tensions across the country following the Constitutional Council's upholding of the controversial results from the October 9th elections. Let's see from scratch what exactly led the Mozambique to turn into a violent state in these days. Mozambique, located on Africa's southeastern coast, is in the midst of a political firestorm. It all started on October 9th, 2024, with the general elections. The ruling Frelimo party's candidate, Daniel Chapo, was declared the winner, but almost immediately, accusations of vote rigging began to surface.
Presidente da República de Moçambique, o cidadão Daniel Francisco Chapo. 2. Valida os resultados das eleições legislativas de 9 de outubro de 2024.
The results felt deeply unfair to many people, and they quickly took to the streets in protest. Things got much worse on October 19th, when two key opposition figures were tragically murdered in Maputo, the capital. This sent shockwaves through the country, sparking even more anger and fear. The opposition leader, Venâncio Mondlane, called for nationwide protests and a general strike just a few days later, on October 21st, urging people to stand up for what they believed in. It was clear the country was on the edge. Then, on October 24th, the National Election Commission made it official: Chapo had won the election with 71% of the vote. But instead of bringing any sense of closure, this only made the protests bigger. As the streets filled with angry demonstrators, the police responded with force, violently dispersing the crowds. This only made things worse, with more people injured and even killed as the protests continued. By October 28th, Mondlane had had enough. He filed a formal challenge to the election results and called for another round of protests to start on October 31st. His calls were heard, and more people flooded the streets, determined to demand justice. But the cost was high. On October 29th, doctors reported that at least 10 people had died during the protests. The violence from the police was becoming harder to ignore, and people were feeling more and more desperate. November brought even more heartbreak. On November 7th, a major protest in Maputo turned into chaos, with violent clashes between demonstrators and police. By this time, over 30 people had lost their lives since the protests began. Mondlane, still holding strong, declared that the protests would continue. He even said that people had the right to self-defense as the government warned that military intervention might be coming. Tensions were rising to a boiling point. As December arrived, the protests showed no signs of stopping. Urban areas were increasingly disrupted, and things only got worse when the national power company, Eletricidade de Moçambique, announced electricity restrictions. People were already struggling, and now they had to deal with power shortages on top of everything else. Then, as if things weren't difficult enough, a powerful cyclone, Cyclone Chido, hit northern Mozambique on December 15th, devastating even more communities. Mondlane, understanding the need for a pause, called for the protests to stop temporarily to mourn the victims of both the cyclone and the violence. People took a moment to reflect on the terrible toll it had taken on their country. But, just days later, on December 23rd, Mondlane made it clear, after the mourning, the protests would resume. He called them life or death for the people of Mozambique, showing just how crucial the fight for justice had become. As Mozambique moves into 2025, no one knows what the future holds. The country is caught in a political storm, struggling to find stability amid violence, grief, and deep division. But one thing is clear: the people are determined to stand up for what they believe in, no matter the cost.
Oi, Joe! Abre vidro. Abre vidro. Não tem como. Se for para chegarmos lá sem pneus, paciência. Muito massa, falou, mano.